Before we begin, I have to make it absolutely clear that the following video has been created strictly for education. We do not suggest that anybody watching tries either mescaline or psilocybin mushrooms. This video has been created to help teach people the differences between the two substances in a very anecdotal/scientific way so that people can learn.
According to YouTube's guidelines shown here, videos which intend to educate are documentary by nature and do not glorify the use of drugs. Both abide by the community safety guidelines and are eligible for monetization. The following video does not glorify the use of drugs. Instead, it attempts to be non-biased while delivering vital life-saving information disguised as entertainment.
In today's video, what we are going to do is compare the effects of the psychedelic mushroom versus the psychedelic cacti, nature's two most prominent traditional psychedelic compounds. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list, and these are my own personal effects, meaning everyone's effects are going to vary dramatically because each drug affects each person in a very different way. And this comparison is going to be of what the effects are like at an average dose. The effects are going to vary dramatically depending on the amount of each substance taken. An average dose of psilocybin mushrooms being anywhere from 2 to 5 grams depending on the strain, and an average dose of mescaline would be anywhere from 2 to 400 milligrams of either extracted or synthetic mescaline, which is going to equal a varying amount of dried or fresh cactus, again depending on the species. Please note that species such as peyote contain additional active alkaloids not present in most others, such as San Pedro, which is going to result in a slightly different experience. Well, psychedelic mushrooms are just what they sound like. They are mushrooms that grow all across the world, which have the active ingredients of psilocybin, psilocin, and baeocystin. Psilocybin converts in the body to psilocin, so you would say psilocin is the active compound that's causing the majority of the psychedelic effects. They have been used by humans for thousands of years. On the other hand, psychedelic cacti such as peyote, San Pedro, Peruvian torch, these are mescaline-containing cacti as well as other active alkaloids. With mescaline being the primary compound responsible for most of the psychedelic effects, they have also been used by humans probably for thousands of years. And if you want to talk about the class of compound, both are psychedelic, with mushrooms being in the tryptamine class and mescaline being in the phenethylamine class. Other notable tryptamines would be substances such as NN-DMT or even 5-MeO-DMT. Other popular phenethylamines would be substances such as 2CB. Hell, you could even call MDMA a phenethylamine. The primary difference, I think, between phenethylamines and tryptamines is, generally speaking, phenethylamines have more of a dopaminergic effect. They're going to cause a little bit more energetic effects in the tripper. But again, this is all dose and individual dependent. Some people would say the opposite. Now, no one has ever died from eating too many psilocybin-containing mushrooms. On the other hand, depending on your sources, there might be a few reported deaths calculated with mescaline. Some sources say there's no deaths. Ultimately, both of these compounds are going to be very physically safe, assuming you're following safe use protocols, such as always testing, say, synthetic mescaline with a testing kit. Link to testing kit in the video description. As mescaline is one of the most famously faked psychedelics, people have sold everything from NBOMEs, calling it synthetic mescaline, to straight up analogs like methyl-escalin or allyl-escalin. There's proscaline, there's escalin. Well, both of them are physically safe. Every drug can become potentially physically dangerous when you combine it with other specific substances. For a complete list of drug interactions, please follow the link in my video description to learn more. So which one is longer? Well, mescaline generally lasts longer. Mescaline lasts anywhere from 8 to 14 hours, with psilocybin mushrooms generally lasting 4 to 8 hours. Now keep in mind, these are the averages. They can, for some people, last even longer, and this is also the total duration, meaning by the 12 or 13 hour mark of mescaline, you're probably not going to be tripping as hard as during the peak. Probably. And with mushrooms, by 8 hours, you're generally completely back down to normal. Now, the main differences between the two when you want to talk about duration is actually come-up time, meaning the amount of time it takes for the substance to actually start affecting you. So from the moment you ingest it, that's how many minutes until you start tripping. For mushrooms, you can start feeling the effects in as little as 20 to 40 minutes, depending on your ingestion method. If you're doing something like the lemon tech, where you grind it all up into a powder and you drink it in a tea with the add of lemon, then it's going to hit you way faster than if you just chew those yucky tasting hard mushrooms. Now with mescaline, even if you have synthetic mescaline, which is going to be the most bioavailable, it's still going to take 2 to 3 hours to come on. Mescaline is notorious for being one of the slowest to take hold psychedelics out of all psychedelic compounds. In fact, my most intense mescaline experience, it didn't even start getting intense until like 3.5 hours in. So this is very important information to know when consuming these substances, because you could take mescaline and naively believe that you should feel it in like 30 to 40 minutes and then be like, oh, it's been 2 hours, nothing's happening, and accidentally take more, only to have a horrendous experience that's way more intense than you were prepared to have. Because doubling, say, the dose of a psychedelic doesn't usually make it twice as intense. It raises the potency exponentially, and it can be the difference between a good trip and the nefarious bad trip. Now, before we move on to the next section, I've got to give a shout out to this video's sponsor. This video has been sponsored by Surfshark. Surfshark is a VPN provider, and what they do is offer you an extra layer of protection against your internet provider seeing what you're looking at. So if you're looking at some of these taboo videos, such as psychedelic stuff, using a VPN will allow you to change your location, and you can remain anonymous while you're searching, which I think is huge these days with everyone trying to break into your privacy and make you feel like you have none. I think a VPN is absolutely essential. Another added benefit is if you're using something like Netflix or Disney Plus, maybe Hulu, you can change your location, and when you're using those services, you can get a whole slew of new movies to watch, because depending on your location, you're offered different movie selections. So that's a big plus. Head on over to surfshark.com. There's a link in the video description. Use the code PSYCHED to get an astounding 83% off and 3 extra months, which unlocks the best price for a VPN on the market. Another added benefit, I guess, to me, or to you if you care about helping me, is the more of you that sign up for Surfshark, the more likely they are to sponsor future videos, which helps my channel. So yeah, head on over to Surfshark, get 83% off with the code PSYCHED. Huge thank you to them, and let's get back to the video at hand. Cheers. First, we're going to touch on how these substances feel in the physical body. This is often referred to as the body high. Mescaline takes the cake as having the most pleasurable, tingling sensations for most people. In fact, this is a driving factor in a lot of people wanting to try it, is because people say it just feels so good in your body. People actually make this comparison. They say mescaline is a little bit like MDMA. I don't agree with the comparison, but they say that in regards to just how it feels in your body. It's a very pleasurable, warm feeling for most people. For other people, it can feel cold and like you're being electrocuted all the time, so it really does depend on your individual brain chemistry, with the mushrooms generally being less pleasurable. Mushrooms on your body can make some people feel energized, but others can feel slow and lethargic, and it can be very stoning in its effects, depending on the dose and the person, where you just kind of want to lay down. Mushrooms do enhance the sensations on your skin, like touch is going to feel slightly enhanced. So things like sex can feel heightened on mushrooms, but it's just going to be nowhere near the degree that everything is heightened on mescaline, assuming you can get through the nausea, of course. Sometimes the nausea can be so intense that all the potential pleasurable effects are just blocked. Now, the next point is the nausea potential. Now, usually shrooms is more nauseating. For example, shrooms are more nauseating than LSD for most, but when it comes to mescaline, for most people, mescaline is going to be one of those rare psychedelics where even in synthetic form, it will cause the user to feel nauseous to the point of maybe even puking. But I would like to also state that both these substances are notoriously nauseating. The nausea rises with the intensity, with the dose that you take, and this can cause some people to panic, especially if you are one of those people who's afraid of puking. Now, personally, I have never puked on either substance. I've come close to puking the very first time I tried mescaline, but what I've learned is the nausea is actually lined up for me with the visuals, kind of like picture being on a boat when the boat's just shaking, and some people can get motion sickness. As the effects ramp up faster, you're not used to the new wavy sensation that the entire world can kind of take on, which equals a buildup of nausea. I'm sure there's other factors involved with the nausea, such as just its activity on the serotonin receptor. So you can actually take certain compounds which can block certain serotonin activity, which some people say does mitigate the nausea, but others claim it mitigates some of the desirable effects as well. So it's kind of like, I feel like it's not worth taking these nausea blockers and just seeing it all as part of the experience. I mean, there's no side effects and effects, there's just effects. Let's start off with the general vibe of each substance. Generally speaking, as the dose gets higher, psilocybin mushrooms are known to be inducers of shadow work, meaning a lot of the pent-up shit that you have been pushing down and not wanting to face, such as maybe your greatest fears in life, maybe the biggest thing you're running from right now that is blocking you from reaching your goals or from being a better person. Mushrooms can bring all of our shadow right in front of us, so we're face to face with that demon, and it can confront us in sometimes a very overwhelming way, where people try to run from the thoughts and they try to push it away. And if you have any experience tripping, you know that the moment you try to push the trip, theoretically you're trying to control the direction of the experience, and mushrooms do not like being controlled. Mushrooms kind of throw you in the roller coaster, strap you in, and they just take you all along for the ride, and you can't really get out until it's over. And it's going to take you where it wants to take you. And if it wants to take you towards your shadow and have a nice little chat with the guy about, you know, how shit's been and how you should be improving, well, mushrooms are going to fucking take you there, whether you like it or not. And if you push against it, well, you're strapped in. You have no choice. And it's going to just intensify to the point where you're absolutely overwhelmed. And some people do end up in the hospital because they feel like they're going crazy, or they can end up in extremely traumatic trips that can wound them, especially if they're not ready to face this shadow. So that being said, if you're going to consume mushrooms, particularly above the 4 gram mark, 4 grams is usually enough to induce shadow work, especially if you're talking about average potency mushrooms like psilocybe cubensis, golden teachers, B positives, even Amazonians, Mexicanas. I can go on and on. A lot of these are of the same potency. And as you hit that 4 gram mark, you can enter shadow work territory, and you've got to be ready to face those demons, or else those demons are going to tear you a new asshole and you're going to be silly. So you've got to be careful. And this is a serious warning when you're ramping up the dose with mushrooms, because the intensity can cause traumatic experiences in those who aren't ready. That being said, if you're gung-ho on doing mushrooms, not everybody is aware that their shadow is even present. Some people, they're taken total by surprise because they're not even consciously aware of how much of their life they're running from until they take the psychedelic. So it's like, this is where it has the potential to change your life, because anything that can induce such feelings of pain, shame, and guilt, and force you to come to terms with shit that you know is wrong, but you're doing anyway. Anything that can do all of those things equally has a huge potential for healing, because you can't heal these wounds until you first look at them and are made aware of them. That's the first step. You got to know they're there and then start working through them to heal them. So mushrooms have great healing potential. Now, on the other hand, mescaline also has great healing potential, but it's generally seen as more of a gentle ride. Now, keep in mind, when we're talking about psychedelics, depending on the dose, there's really no such thing as gentle. There's, I'm going to tear you a new asshole mushrooms with the shadow that's just you, versus the mescaline that's kind of like just gently patting you as it just slowly slides in. Neither one is necessarily gentle. They're both going to force you to face some shit. It's all relative to what you're comparing it to. Yeah, but as far as psychedelics go, mescaline is on the more safer, calmer side. It can still get really intense, though. It can still get overwhelming. So I want to be careful with my word choices here and just make this crystal clear for everybody watching. You're never guaranteed a safe, easy ride, unless, of course, you have your shit completely in check. Like, you got to have your set and setting perfect. If you're a person that's already in charge of their demons and working through them, or maybe even working with their demons, then gentle might actually be the ride you get. Might even be a little underwhelming. So it all depends on the person and their intentions and who they are going in. Psychedelics aren't like other drugs. They work with what you bring into them. So if you're bringing in a lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, the trip is going to ride on the coattails of what you're dragging through those doors. You catch my drift, bro? Now, on the positive side, both these psychedelics can cause ego death. And why am I saying ego death is positive? By ego death, I mean that feeling of oneness, complete unity with yourself, your environment, with the people you're with. These psychedelics can cause you to enter some very interesting states. And again, this is even on 4 to 5 grams or 300 to 400 milligrams of mescaline, hydrochloride, or extracted. These doses, especially if you're a sensitive individual, are enough to cause that type of unity. They're enough to have a full-blown experience where you may not come out the other side the same person. You might be changed forever in a positive way. It can cause someone who's not very spiritually inclined to start seeing things in a more spiritual type way. And I don't mean like woo-woo, wah-wah, spiritual, new agey bullshit. I mean like seeing that the energy they bring into the world is the energy they're going to get back from the world. Like some very simple concepts that a lot of people don't understand, they can be made very clear after some of these experiences, because even on a real physics level, everything is energy. I mean, all this shit that I'm looking at right now is just vibrating. And I'm not a quantum physicist or anything like this, but I do know from watching YouTube videos that what makes this solid is the fact that it's vibrating a lot faster than something that is soft or liquid. They're vibrating slower. Like at the end of the day, everything is vibration. Everything is energy. And at the risk of sounding too woo-woo-y, these psychedelics can really highlight that, because even just with the visuals, which we're going to jump to now, you can see everything turn into an energetic field. Let's talk on the visuals. How do the visuals compare? Now, personally speaking, psilocybin mushrooms are gorgeous. The visuals, for me, are very similar to DMT, which has astounding visuals, but mescaline is a certain kind of special. Mescaline has been referred to as nature's LSD because, visually speaking, it has a similar electric vibe, but it leans towards being more organic. And this is something that is uniquely difficult to try to put into words. It's impossible to verbalize. But if I had to do it, I would say mescaline is, I know this isn't against LSD, but mescaline is definitely prettier than acid. Acid's more of like this, everything's washed in waves, and it's got more of this underwater pastel look, whereas mescaline is more clean. The vibrancy of everything is turned way up. The symmetry of everything you're looking at is heightened, which is hard to explain because it causes visual distortions where things can look beautifully symmetrical, kind of in like a Picasso style way, if that's making any sense. It is astounding. Looking at nature on mescaline is like nothing else you have ever experienced. Like I've seen mountains on it, and I've seen rivers like in person, and it makes the whole thing look like some impressionist type painting, but beautiful. Mescaline, I guess, is kind of like a mix of what would happen if you mixed psilocybin and acid. Yeah, now that I think about it. Now, psilocybin mushrooms have a more HD-like effect, especially in lower doses. But in higher doses, I find mushrooms can be a little more wavy. Things start to have this breathing effect with mushrooms. Now, things can breathe on mescaline, but mushrooms, they breathe a little bit more. It kind of would look like inanimate objects are literally that. They're going like... Also referred to as a shrinking and stretching effect. So if you see your face in the mirror, it can kind of grow, shrink, and stretch. Mushrooms, for me, are more likely to induce seeing patterns, especially as the dose goes around 4 or more grams. You can start to see these patterns that almost look like hieroglyphic language jutting out of surfaces, and it almost looks like somebody has drawn the hieroglyphs on, and they're kind of like morphing and moving. It's a really bizarre but cool effect, like you're kind of transported to ancient Egypt almost. I would just say that mescaline has a little bit more electricity to it. Mushrooms feel more organic, earthy tones, versus mescaline is a little bit more neon, hence why people call it nature's LSD. LSD is defined as very electric, and you do get some of that electricity with mescaline. Things flow more with mescaline. Like if you're looking at wood grain, it can start flowing like a river, versus mushrooms, I don't generally get that flowy effect. I feel like I'm absolutely butchering the visual section of this experience, but I'm doing my best. Visuals are some of the hardest things to explain. It's better to show pictures, but I'm trying to use words here, so bear with me. Ultimately, what it comes down to, if you want to talk about just sheer beauty, I think that both are stunning, if you can get to a point where you can appreciate the visuals, because usually when the visuals get super intense, so do the mental effects, and when those mental effects get heightened, the last thing you give a fuck about is how things look visually. But when it comes to that, I say mescaline is prettier. I've, on mescaline, just looked in the air, and I've seen like electricity shooting through the air, making unique geometric patterns that I could almost like, walk around and see just in thin air. And this is more prominent when the lights are out, and say there's like a smoke detector, like that little red light I was watching of a smoke detector once. And when it would flash on, it would like shoot these patterns out of it. It was so cool. And I haven't necessarily seen the same type of patterning with mushrooms. But really what it comes down to is just nature. Looking at nature on both is really pretty, but nature has a certain kind of gorgeous, unreal, again, kind of Picasso style look on mescaline that is just unmatched. A lot of people state that some of the best parts of the psilocybin experience is when it wears off, especially if you have like one of those really intense facing your shadow experiences. When it wears off, and whether you won or lost the fight, you're just fucking grateful that you're back to normal, because it can be so intense at high doses. So then it's like when it ends, you're like, oh my God, I'm me again. I have control of my thoughts again. I just got off the ride. So it's euphoric in the sense of you're grateful that you made it through it alive. In that regard, I actually think, like, if it was a comparison, shrooms have the better come down. Mescaline has a lot more energy, so that energy takes a lot longer to taper off, so you can have a lot more difficulty sleeping. It's not like you feel shitty as it's wearing down, but it's almost like it's just harder to fall asleep, versus with mushrooms, I find it extremely easy to fall asleep after they're gone. Keep in mind, mushrooms still give you some energy, even during the come down, but it's less than mescaline. So I think the come down is a little more gentle. And there's just that whole like shadow and making it through that makes you feel great when they wear off. Afterglow. Now, by afterglow, I mean, what are the following days, weeks, months, if you have a really insightful experience, years like? Well, since both these psychedelics can highlight a lot of shit in your life that you need to face, both have the potential for a fantastic afterglow, because this is when you have the chance to integrate the experience. You can either choose to leave it in the past and just try to wipe it clean, Control-Alt-Delete all of it and forget it ever happened, or you can choose to learn from the experience you had, assuming, of course, you had an experience that there's something to learn from. Not all psychedelic trips offer real value. Some of them are just a ride. You get off and you're like, that was fun, and then it's just over and there's nothing more. But assuming you had a substantial experience, well, now during the afterglow is where you can start putting in the real work. You got to think of psychedelics kind of like working out. You don't actually build muscle when you're lifting weight. No, when you're lifting weight, that's when you're tearing things down, and it's when you rest and eat food that the muscle rebuilds stronger. So the psychedelics can kind of tear you down a little bit, and now you got to take those lessons when it's over and apply them in order to become a new, better version of yourself. So with psychedelics, it's all about the intent you have going in. So if you have the intent going in that you're going to learn from it no matter what happens and you're going to make the best of it, that is going to offer you the greatest potential for integration during the afterglow. And that's when you're going to be, I think, reaping the full 100% of the benefits from these experiences. So it's all about that intent going in. You want to have a curious, open-minded intent going in, and you want to be ready to just surrender control and allow it to show you what it has to show you without being too combative, because then your afterglow on both substances can be phenomenal. Anyway, this has been a pretty long video. I hope you guys enjoyed all of my verbal descriptions. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you position your mouse or your finger to that thumbs up button and click it. Please like the video. Please comment below for the algorithm. Help get this video shared. And also, if you like my work, consider pledging on Patreon. We could use your support. As little as $2 can help make sure I can start making more of these educational videos again. Let's move the channel away from being all about Adam and let's talk about some education again. How about that? Let's make it a mix of both, okay? A mix of both is good. You could also visit psychsubstance.shop and buy yourself a trip blanket, which are amazingly soft and so many people love them, and they make tripping great because you can just cuddle up in them. Anyway, comment below and let me know if you'd like to see more Versus style videos like this, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Cheers, guys.